Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Steve Leibowitz, and coming up in today's newscast, mass protests continue as judicial overhaul heads towards first Knesset reading expected tomorrow. Jerusalem lobbying for U.S. veto in tomorrow's expected Security Council vote condemning settlement policy. And Israel has its first mixed martial arts champion, and she is a tough 19-year-old woman. In blunt comments, U.S. Ambassador Tom Nides directly called on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to pump the brakes and plans for judicial overhaul. Nides told a CNN podcast that Washington is urging Israel to build a consensus before moving forward, and added that the economic impact has caught Netanyahu's attention.
The Netanyahu-led coalition does not appear to be slowing down. Justice Minister Levine and Law Committee Chair Simcha Rotman are preparing to advance the first reading of the first parts of the judicial overhaul package tomorrow. They advanced the same measures through the Knesset Law Committee last week. Meanwhile, nationwide protests continue. Last night, tens of thousands of protesters returned to the streets to fight the plan that Levine said he is determined to carry out. Demonstrators marched, carried Israeli flags, and chanted slogans. The marchers have attracted large crowds on a weekly basis since early January, when Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government announced the judicial overhaul. At least some of the protesters do not reject judicial reform, but want it to be measured.
We would like to see a process where the court and the jurisdiction process takes some measures to improve, but no real need to make a drastic change and actually impact the rights of the citizens here in this country.
Organizers of the protest movement have declared tomorrow as a national day of struggle. For the second week in a row, it will include a large rally outside the Knesset, as well as demonstrations in various cities.
A new UN Security Council resolution expected to be raised tomorrow in the world body calls for an immediate halt to Israeli settlement activities in Judea and Samaria. The U.S. is among the critics of the Israeli policy, but Washington also opposes the new move to condemn Israel.
It's unclear whether the United States will cast a veto. The draft submitted by the United Arab Emirates demands that Israel immediately cease all settlement activity. The Palestinians are pushing for a vote to be taken as early as tomorrow. The issue was raised following Israel's announced plan to legalize 9 outposts and add 10,000 housing units in the territories.
We are deeply dismayed by Israelis' announcement that they will advance thousands of new settlements and retroactively legalize 9 outposts in the West Bank that were until now illegal under Israeli law. The United States strongly opposes these unilateral measures, which exacerbates tensions.
Israel annexed eastern Jerusalem in 1980 and considers it part of its undivided capital. Since 1967, Israel has administered Judea and Samaria, commonly referred to as the West Bank. Successive governments have expanded Jewish settlement in the territories, which are home to more than 500,000 Israelis. While the U.S. opposes Israeli settlement activities, it also opposes the resolution and wants to keep the Israeli-Palestinian conflict out of the world body.
We have been fairly consistent in over the course of this administration that we don't view the UN as the most practical or useful forum for discussing this issue, and that this is something that the two sides need to discuss and engage and negotiate and work on among themselves.
The last time a resolution against Israel on settlements was passed by the Security Council was in December of 2016. It was the final month of the Obama administration. The U.S. decided to abstain and not veto, allowing the resolution to pass. It's unclear how the U.S. plans to vote this time.
And joining us now is Dani Ayalon, former Israeli ambassador to the U.S. and former deputy foreign minister. And let me just say, it's so good to see you again, Dani.
Wonderful to see you, Steve.
Let me get right down to it. Can Jerusalem count on Washington's veto at the Security Council tomorrow?
Well, that would depend on the language of the resolution. If the language of the resolution will be one-sided, as the Palestinians always go for, without any reference to the incitement of the Palestinian Authority and the terror against Israeli civilians, I believe, yes, we may see a veto cast by the United States, although they are not very happy about it. I think what they would like very much to do is avoid a resolution and go for some consensus, which is by a statement, a presidential statement by the Security Council, I would say, avoids any resolutions.
You know, Danny, the UAE is one of our partners in these Abraham Accords, and they are sponsors of this resolution. Netanyahu wants to advance and expand the accords. Doesn't look like we're going in the right direction to get that done.
Well, you're right. I guess things are not going in the right directions in many ways now. But we have to remember that the EU is not acting on its own accord. The UE is today the Arab League representative in the Security Council. You know, it's a rotational position. So they actually have to reflect what is asked from them by Arab countries. And I'm sure if it was just up to them, I'm not sure we would have seen such a political action by them. But it's I would say, almost really doesn't matter. It's the fact is that we're going to face the Security Council.
U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Tom Nides, today said directly to Netanyahu, and I have to say a very unusual thing to happen. He told him, put the brakes on the judicial overhaul. He said it publicly on CNN. He said it's bad for the economy and dangerous for democracy. He didn't pull punches. Many of those that Netanyahu respects now have told him pretty much the same thing. Do you think that Netanyahu is going to back off? And if he does, how?
Well, I hope so, because not necessarily because of the American request, although we have to heed American request, we have to respect it, we have to remember there is no better friend and ally than the United States to Israel. We owe them a lot. I have always maintained that it's a two-way street, and of course, we also happen to serve, and we're very proud that we can really protect American interests and, of course, the values, which is the core of the issue now. So if the United States sees that there is a risk or a danger or compromising the independence of our judicial system, that is going to be much harder for them to defend Israel. Here we just talk now about the veto power in the United States, let alone in other international organizations where the United States are actually invoking the very prestigious and very well-respected judicial system in Israel to avoid any international investigations.
Danny, we're almost out of time, but I really want to ask you just one more thing. Danny, do you think that it's becoming harder for people like you? You are one of the foremost defenders of Israel over the last decades, I would say. Is it tough for you to defend Israel right now?
Well, in a way, yes. On the one hand, you see all the demonstrations. We are still a great democracy, a very vibrant democracy. But if we change the rule of the games, I'm afraid it will not be easy